a couple of things. We're trying to live stream this, and we hope that'll all work. So we might, if we have any glitches, we might have to stop, and I'm sure the phone will start ringing if it's not working right. I am concerned. We've never done this before, so we're hoping that the mic up here will be able to pick everybody up. And so we're going to live and learn. Also, I want to thank you all for coming in with your masks. I hate this thing on my face. I've been accused of being a bandit, and now I really look like a bandit with this mask on. So, but thank you for that. John and Eric will probably, John doesn't have his, Eric's
we'll take ours off.
Gonna have theirs off. I think we've got 15, 20 feet there between the first row, so I think hopefully we should be fine. There is some coffee in the back, and there is some cookies. You make yourself at home. If you need to wander back there and get some, please go ahead. Traditionally, John has done, and possibly a lot of you have already seen it, his demonstration, which is very, very fascinating, where he takes a piece of clay and turns it into this, and then while he's talking, he ends up turning it back into something else. But he's done that so many times, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, and it's very, very impressive. But today we wanted to take a different slant on this. We wanted John to talk about the creative process of a piece of art. You know, what is it that starts the thing? How's the idea happen? How does it evolve? And then we wanted to bring in Eric. And one of the things I love about John, maybe you can hear me better if I do this. One of the things I love about John is that he's willing to share credit. And he's always made it very clear what an intricate part of his end product is with the sculpture in particular, comes through ERIK and with their collaboration. So John, I don't want to steal their thunder, but I want you to understand that that's why ERIK's here, because he is a very important part of the process and has a lot of input as things go through and evolve. So with that, I'll turn it over to these guys.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so you're up, right?
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, I was just going to explain to everyone why this photo was up. This is John's bronze 1876. Anybody remember that? That's the bronze in pieces, and that's how I get it at my shop before we start putting it together with John's help and all the people that work for me. And the reason I put that up is because it kind of ties into everything we're talking about. If we go to the next one, there's the finished piece, and I'll let John take it from here as to how he got started working on this show.
Yeah. The first thing I like to always talk about is get away from the nuts and bolts a little bit. I think of art as poetry. I think that in order to have a vocabulary, though, you have to learn a craft. Just as a person learns to play a piano, doesn't mean they're going to create these wonderful concertos. They have to have the poetry inside them. Also, it also helps explain my connection to Eric. Eric takes care of two sides to him. He's a great craftsman, but he's also a great artist in his own right. And it's been a big gift for me to be able to have somebody other than Sue, because Sue has always been the one who has this miracle way of seeing things. I always say that maybe it's because she has better taste than I have. I don't know what it is, but she sees stuff in my work that I have trouble seeing. And I thought, how in the hell could she do that? And she says she's not an artist. But yet that I know is a big key to my success. When Eric and I got together, I started to find the same types of things with Eric. He has a very particular way of judging what is going on and what is right and wrong, and he's not afraid to say it. And again, that's another thing that's just such a gift for an artist like myself. So to get back to this particular piece here, that came out of a trip that Sue and I took to the battlefield of the 1876, the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And I talked to a few of the historians back there, and they were talking about the principles, which was Gull was on the one end, Setting Bull is in the middle, and then Crazy Horse. Those are considered to be the main principles of the battle. And I started to think about a composition. That's the other part that's important. People say, well, you know, you have all this detail and you know how to do it and you create these great faces and all. 99% is a great composition. And so I could see these guys and imagine them as if they came into my studio right after the battle and I did their portrait. How would they look? And Sitting Bull is the prominent character. He's in the middle. And I'm thinking mostly composition. Gull was over 6'4". Sitting Bull was probably 5'11", so he wasn't short. Crazy Horse was more like my size, 5'6". And so I had to design it so that their heads would all come out the right way. You see, Sitting Bull is taller. He also has a war bonnet on. He was given a gift at the Bozeman battle a year earlier, and so I knew that he had a war bonnet, but you don't see photographs of him with the bonnet until he got with the Buffalo Bill Cody show. And so I had to research that, make sure that he had one, because if he didn't have one, I wouldn't have done this piece. The reason why I wouldn't have done it, because it would have ruined my composition. So it's kind of a funny thing that a lot of people don't realize, that when you're doing art, you know, I got one of my friends here, Kathy McCrane, who's a photographer, and I bought one of her photographs, and the design, it's a cowboy horse dust, but you know, God, what a gorgeous design. It's always about the design. It's neat that everything else is right. First thing is design. So that's where all this comes from. So if we talk about the artist process, I'm always going to be thinking design, and then like a great movie, you want to have things visually and historically correct.
So what got you, so you had done this sculpture, which is probably one of your most famous sculptures, and then what it got you thinking about a painting, right?
Yeah, good. Yeah. See how he reminds me of where we're headed with all this. This is really nice.
Well, this talk is about from clay to bronze, but as you see, John has 15 paintings in his show, so that's a big part of it too. And it's not like those things are separate. His sculpture and his painting comes from the same place, and they inspire each other in the same methods and everything. Yeah. And so I think this bronze inspired.
Yeah. So after my last show 4 years ago, and Brad suggested that we do it again, and the timing was just about right, I talked to Sue, and Sue says, you're really going to need to do that 1876 in a painting. And my first reaction is I don't want to. And the reason I didn't want to is that I hadn't worked out where are these guys setting. Are they outside or are they inside? I wasn't really sure. And composition kind of threw me a little bit. And then I started to realize that the design that I created for the sculpture fit the painting very well. The other thing I had going for me is I have a friend who's a historian and does reenactments for artists and such. And this is the beginning of that. John decided that we should take a trip to Montana and have his friend Michael Badhand basically accurately reset up this meeting from 1876 on site, and John would go there to study it and basically see what he wanted to do for his painting. Yeah, the thing that's interesting is people will ask about models and things like that. Generally speaking, especially as a sculptor, this is myself and Michael Badhand talking about what's going on. You know, if I wasn't in the picture, that could be a scene from 1870 right there. Talking about the accuracy of the history is one part, but putting models and putting other things in front of you adds other scenarios that maybe you hadn't thought of, and it starts to build. I've developed a little saying that I use with my students, is be an advocate for the art, not your ego. And what that means is that sometimes you work very hard to get something created, and you might be 90% done with it, and you realize that it's not quite right. You start to learn there's something wrong with it. And to be an advocate for the art means that you'll be willing to throw it away. In other words, start over again. So generally speaking, I do a lot of research that may or may not have anything to do with the finished product, but it sends little sparks. These are the three models. These are all crows from that trip. And We dressed him up to match the sculpture to a certain degree. They're in a tent that fits that 1876 or a teepee. My goal, though, is that I didn't use their faces because this was a historic portrait. So we have Gall on the end, who has been photographed a lot, so I had lots of documentation on what Gall looks like. Sitting Bull in the middle has been photographed the most, so I knew exactly what he looked like. Crazy Horse had never been photographed, but his descendants are still around. They talk about what he looked like, so we already knew what kind of man he was and so forth. I also knew that he died when he was 35 years old, so you get an idea of how old he was at the time of when I did the painting. So I'm able to kind of put all this stuff together, and I use basically the design cues of my sculpture, and I've done this more than once with different things, but a lot of times they don't translate. In this particular case, it translated pretty well, and it also answered the question about whether or not this is going to be an outside or an inside. So we set it up inside the teepee, and of course that gave that all these beautiful design cues in the painting. Have we got a picture of the painting up there?
It's going to be coming up.
All right.
And this is the start. I went, and since I was there with John in Montana, and from my perspective, setting that up to match his sculpture was really exciting, and to see the inspiration come from sculpture to the painting. And so I would go check on John at his studio, and so this is when he was drawing it out, and then the rough stages of the painting. Keep going, and there's the finished painting.
Yeah, you can see that how the background on this really added another complement to the design element, and I was really glad to see that the sculpture doesn't have a background, and so that it turned out to be just as successful, I think, in a painting as it did as a sculpture. But again, you're using abstract designs, V shapes. The center of Setting Bull, he's got more of a pyramid shaped on his war bonnet, is one of the changes I made. The sculpture has more of a sunburst, so it's a circle. It's sort of like a Madonna or a Byzantine painting. And so, but those are things you don't know until you get all the other components in, and you start playing off shapes together. And those are the changes that you use to develop these ideas.
And I can tell you from my perspective of watching John's sculptures start and watching the painting start, you can see the connection. Like when he roughs in the sculpture, and everything's just kind of basically there. It's the same thing on the paintings. You look at it at one point in the painting, and you'll see some more later, but all roughed in, and then he just basically dials it in as time goes by. And in a sense, it's kind of the same as when we'll talk about the bronzes later, but they kind of come together in the same fashion, where you have to weld pieces together and you rough out where you welded it, and then you make the texture look better and better, and dial the piece in, and we'll have John come look at them. So basically all these art forms are real similar.
Yeah, the thing is, it's never pat. I love that analogy when people go see a movie. They walk out of the theater, and you'll always hear someone say, "I really love that movie." Someone else says, "I like the book better." And that always informs me that people's pictures in their own head are better than what someone else's pictures made. So the goal for an artist is to leave room for the viewer. And the key is that you never have a pat template to go by. You always start with something, and then you start massaging it and working it. A painting, in a way, is a little easier because you're dealing with paint. You cover it up, you wipe it off, you do it over again. Sculpture, I'm working with a clay, and I'm not going to have it, the piece is not going to be clay, it's going to be bronze. So I'm kind of shooting ahead of the thing. And so now I've got a guy like ERIK, who I know I can get to ERIK's foundry or studio in like 15 minutes, and we go back and forth a lot. So as the piece starts to come into bronze, we start manipulating the bronze. And this is the reason I have these clays up here. The finished, this is a Crazy Horse. The finished one is up here. But as we start putting in the little things that most people would think of details, I'm thinking of them as design cues. His hair, his tendrils of hair coming down, the kestrel war bonnet that he has. Those things are all parts of the challenges of making a design. And if I'm going to talk about the design again, I'll talk about the kestrel. my friend,
Well, hold on, let's get right back to that, because
Yeah.
I had this,
okay.
I was gonna show them a little more about
Oh, yeah,
Montana.
yeah, okay, let's stay on
Just
track
because
here.
this is about the show too, but this was another site inside a teepee in Montana where John had the mother and child set up, and you might recognize that from one of his paintings. And then go ahead, Chris. There's where I was saying, there's where he started to rough in. That's the actual painting that's here. And you can see in the rough stages. And then go ahead, Chris. There's the baby. One more. And then there's the finished painting, all dialed in.
You see, at that point, I mean, artists already know all of this, and everybody has a different way of working. But as people that maybe don't understand that it's sort of like you have a dial and you're dialing things up and down. And the way I work is I like to get paint on the whole piece, and I finish it all at the same time. I start bringing it up, and it gets more and more in focus, and that allows me a little flexibility. I also don't put stretcher bars on my paintings either until I'm almost done. I paint them on I put the canvas on a board, and then I allow the design to tell me where I'm going to crop it. So you have a lot of things that I'm always thinking about in terms of that. And let's go back to that one more time, go backwards. The other part about that is that the thing that you want to do, is something going to be a painting or not? The thing about a mother and a baby is done 1,000 times, but the part that I really got excited about is I saw the design opportunity of having her kind of come out of the abyss. I felt like she's almost in this cocoon, or you could even say kind of like a womb, a type of a feeling. The other part about it is that in these teepees, they have teepee liners that are made up of exploit ropes, and the exploits, of course, are the pictographs of the heritage of the family. And I love the idea of the little baby who's just starting off in life, you know, stuck in his cradle board there. Mom is just getting ready to touch him as if to give him a blessing, but he's surrounded by the exploits of his fathers, his grandfathers, and his people. And that speaks to why I'm so interested in doing the Native American stuff. I call it American mythology because I'm not a Native American. I approach everything from an outsider's point of view, but it gives me a way of seeing the things that are similar in my own culture, so they become metaphors for me. You know, when some of my Native American friends do a painting of their people, they're doing history. I'm doing metaphors because I wasn't part of that history. I have my own history. So I'm kind of using that to talk about who I am. This could be a scene of you know, Sue when she was young with her babies and stuff, but yet the whole setup wouldn't have the metaphors in it. Okay.
So this is another painting in the show, Night Spirit, in the rough stages, and then the next shot shows you, boom, dialed in. And then this one will show you again a connection between the paintings and sculptures, because the painting of Crazy Horse in the show, you can see, real similar. So there's your...
Yeah, we're just getting started. Some of the details are starting to come on the clay there.
And then the next shot, I think, is there's working on the kestrel that you were talking about.
Yeah, the kestrel was, the idea of the kestrel was given to me by Michael Badhat, who said there was historic evidence that the Crazy Horse had an affinity to the kestrel, and that it would be appropriate for him to have a headdress made from a kestrel. And of course, I'm getting excited partly, yeah, because it's not only a cool thing to do, but it's a design challenge. You know, you put a bird on a man's head, and it's like it's either going to look really, really good or really, really stupid. You know? So I happened, Sue and I were in Europe at the time when I was thinking about this, and I got on eBay and I started looking for kestrels. And of course, they're protected. You just can't go out and buy a kestrel. So I found one that was mounted in the 50s, and so that's who this little character is. So I sent him off to my friend Michael Badhat, and he the historian, and he created what he thought would have been appropriate for Crazy Horse to use as a headdress, and so it landed on my big painting, 1876. It's also in Night Spirit, and it's in my clay. Oh, and this is kind of funny. Yeah.
This is John.
Eric just taking pictures of what I'm working.
No, this is John working on the details. Which, by the way, oh, there's Crazy Horse checking him out.
Yeah, that's Eric. That's Eric's sense of humor. I think it's funny. Yeah.
So I just know that when John was, remember you were trying to decide whether to put the Kestrel on or not?
Yeah.
And I told you, you got to have this on there.
Yeah, yeah, and see,
I
that's.
love guys with birds on their heads.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
a sucker for it.
Yeah, yeah, and see, that goes back to the statement about permission, that sometimes you need someone to say, yeah, go ahead and go for it. And I gotta say, I was afraid Sue wasn't gonna like it, you know, and she goes, yeah, that worked out really good.
You loved it, right, Sue?
Yeah. Yeah, but that,
Sue's all, it doesn't matter what anybody says, Sue's always right. No, but I mean, but I mean, she actually is right. Like, she just knows. Not just because she's John's wife. She knows what's right.
yeah,
Right, John?
Yeah, I'll take that a little further and just say that, you know, whenever I've taught, one of the things I learn from students is the ones that are really good are ones that have learned how to curb their ego and take good criticism. And I say good criticism, you almost have to train people to learn how to talk to you about what they think is right or not, so that you don't get in the weeds with it. But Sue always has this understanding. It's not necessarily this particular thing is wrong. It's just there's something isn't quite working, and maybe I have to figure it out. Once I figure it out, she goes, I'm not sure what you did, but that's a lot better. People almost in any field, I believe, writing music or architecture or anything, they get a little bit stale when they're around it. You know, I always use the sense of smell as a good example. Your brain will warn you that you're in an environment that maybe is toxic, but if you're around it for long enough, you won't smell it anymore. I believe your eyes do the same thing. I have about a 5 or 10 minute window where I can really see exactly where everything fits, and then everything starts getting a little ambiguous. You know, most people that aren't around artists a lot are always surprised to see the mirror behind the artist. And what the mirror is that it flips the brain, so you can see things again for the first time. The same thing, a good critique will do the same thing. Someone will come in and they'll say something, and it resets your brain so you can see clearer what you're doing.
There you are with the mirror.
Oh yeah, there it is with the mirror. Yeah. So, and then of course, the advent of the phone. I've got my little videos. I got my pictures. I can flip them. You know, when I leave my studio, I have the pictures that I'm working on, and in idle moments, I'll just turn it on and I just flip them back and forth, and I can see things, little mistakes that I hadn't seen when I'm in front of it. Sculpture, as an example. If you take a still picture of a sculpture, I find if something's off a little bit, I have a tendency to want to turn it even after it's a picture, because I want to turn it to its best side, and you can't because it's locked in. And so it becomes a really good tool. When I walk in my studio, I always hold on to my sculpture and I turn it to the best view. And of course, I'm not helping myself, because the best view, they all need to be the best view. Yeah, and of course, this is just showing, people might assume that when you're working on something, you just start at the top and you work down. I'm usually taking pieces apart. This is the head to Sister Moon, which is here in the
And then I just put this in to show John usually, after his pieces are molded and made, he kind of has a collection of old clays and heads and everything in his.
Yeah. And then I clean them all out once in a while. But again, this is inspirational. I'll look up and I'll go, yeah, I had something going on with that piece. Maybe I'll come back and play with that again.
And there's her. Yeah. The thing she's holding.
Oh yeah, the thing in the foreground. That was the inspiration to this particular piece. There's medicine people have a staff sometimes that they use that's actually more of a digging stick, and it sounds very unromantic. A stick with a point on the end of it, but literally how they see it is that when it's in the ground, it connects them to the earth, and then they have these little charms or effigies or whatever you want to call them that decorate the top of it that represent the universe. So you have both ends of the spectrum. You have the connection to the earth, then you have these little shapes of the sun, the moon, the universe, and so what she's doing is she's holding that, and it gives her a kind of a spiritual fairy tale kind of a quality. I did something very similar with an older woman, and I thought, well, it'd be fun to do one with a younger one. And here I am, of course, working on the head of He Who Jumps Over Everyone.
And then there's
Oh, yeah, then,
another model.
yeah, this was for Raven's Gift.
That's the next painting. But you can see once again how the sculptures and the bronzes all tie together with the models and everything.
Yeah, the title of this is kind of, it's fun because there's just so many stories. They talk about the Raven as being in some of their creation stories. And of course, a lot of these things that I talk about are more general. But the idea is that Raven brought the sun to the people as a gift. And so hence the title, Raven's Gift. That's a sun design on the exploit road behind it.
And then back to there's the finished 1876 in your studio.
Yeah, and of course, the clay, people also ask about the clay. There's a lot of armature that goes in that, meaning there's foam, there's steel, there's tubing, and in a case like this, the design has already been set because I did a smaller version of it. I did a piece about like this, and then I did one that was twice the size of that, and then this would be the third generation. This is the third size. Doing different sizes is convenient and it's really neat, but a good artist will never just do another size unless it gets better. And in this particular case, every size this got bigger, it got better, and I think that was my main motivation. I was very excited to see that come up to that level. And the scale of this piece is about 80–85%, like life size.
I thought, because now we're going to be moving into, because the phase after this would be the mold making
Yeah.
and the bronze process, but I thought if we want to take a couple questions for John about the sculpting process.
Yeah,
anybody?
that would be a good time. Yes.
First of all, thank you both for being here. I have two questions. One regards proportion. And mother and child, when you do the rough of the baby's face, you do the rough of the mother's face. How do you ultimately put the correct proportion?
That's a great question. Yeah, it really is. You know, the anatomy of a baby is that to begin with is that their head is extraordinarily large for their body. Okay, the baby grows, the head doesn't grow so much. That continues all the way through. As an example, ERIK is 6'4", I'm 5'5". We both have the same size head. So in sculpture, you can use that same thing you were talking about to illustrate how tall somebody is, even though they're not next to anything. You can tell, if I did a self-portrait of myself, you can tell that I'm a shorter man because I'm not very many heads tall. Where ERIK is more like 8.5 heads tall, I'm more like 7 heads tall. Now get back to your question. I already know the basic. Most women's heads is about 8.5 to 9 inches. And so you already know what the baby is. The other issue about a piece like that is that you have the baby's coming in front. So you have a kind of a foreshortening thing. You want to show depth, but you have to be careful. Like for instance, her hand's reaching out. One of the things that like a typical camera distortion would be is that her hand would be too big. And so when you actually see something through your eyes as opposed to a camera, you're really not seeing an image, you're scanning the image. So you see things a lot differently. So what a painter needs to do is he needs to reset the way a human being actually sees a scene. So part of my design for Mother's Blessing is that I also put things in the foreground. In other words, there's a robe, there's a wood container that's got some things in it. And what that was to do was a vehicle that lead the eye to the baby and then to the mother. And I pulled that a little out of focus so that you didn't dwell on it. The key to everything is how your eye moves around either a sculpture or a painting. It's always the same way. And an artist will do that from value changes to sizes to edges. And after a while, you kind of learn what's going to hit the sweet spot and where you want your eye to land. And if you have something really prominent, like the baby's head, it needs to feel right. And so it's really a judgment call. You can't just take calipers out or measurements and just say, this is when I'm going to make it. If it doesn't feel right, there's something wrong either in the actual literal size or there's something else in the composition that's making it feel awkward.
So as you're dialing it in, you're just always making sure it feels right to you.
Yeah, yeah.
Or a part of the dialing it in might be because something didn't feel right.
Yeah. That's a classic example is if you sometimes a self-portrait of an artist, sometimes they will portray themselves with a paintbrush in their hand, and you can tell whether they did it from life or they did it from a photograph, because if they did it from a photograph, their hand is always going to be too big because the camera just doesn't see it that way unless you get really back far. If you're a good photographer, you can do that. And that's also a good subject. Photography is a wonderful tool, but it also ruins your work. So you've got to know those two elements. Just like any great tool will help you, but it'll also hurt you at the same time.
The second question involves scaling up from small size to mid-size to 85% size. How do you make it identical to one another? What mechanical steps do you use?
It's really really basic. In sculpture, you use proportional calipers.
Okay.
So it's like tongs that do this, and then you have a little thing that adjusts.
Okay.
And I can set it to, and so I'm using my small one as a model. Obviously, as I get bigger, the little mistakes that I made in the little one are little mistakes. As it gets bigger, they become bigger mistakes. So I have to always kind of keep that in mind too. The final analysis is it has to look right. But that's how I start. It's very methodical and mechanical at first. Horses are very well documented. One of the things about He Who Jumps is that he's on that's 1830s, and a lot of the Indians rode really small ponies. I mean, some of these guys were really small, and some of the guys weren't small; they were big. So you put a 6-foot man, on an 1830, Spanish Mustang or something, who's maybe 4.5 or 5 hands tall. It's not gonna look exactly right to the modern eye. And so those are decisions I have to make too from a historic point of view. In this particular case, I think it served the sculpture. The big man on that horse helped because the horse also is wearing a war bonnet too. So compositionally, that also helped my composition. So I'm not only historically accurate, it also was designed. It was a design gift as well.
One more question?
What type of clay do you use for this sculpture?
The type of clay is the brand or just the type? Yeah.
What type?
It's think of regular clay, but without water. It's just oil and wax mixed with it.
Okay.
So if you're going to do ultimately a bronze in something, is that water clay there? This is think of it as wax. And I can make a mold of that, and then ERIK can make a wax casting, and it'll look exactly like what I just did here.
Right.
The nice thing about this is that it never dries out. So it's very convenient for a guy who's going to make a bronze. If I was to use water-based clay, then this is going to dry out and it's going to get hard, and it'll be a little more difficult to make a mold. And you have something, it's going to be perishable probably anyway.
So it's like
so this is the clay of choice for people that make bronzes.
It's like a plastilina then?
It is plastilina.
It is plastilina.
That's Chavant, right?
No, this one's called, the brand on this is Classic. It really doesn't matter, but it's made exactly the way regular clay is made. It's just not water based, it's oil wax based.
Okay.
Well, since you were talking about that, we might as well go into the mold making.
Yeah, let's get into ERIK's domain here a little bit more.
So once that sculpture, the He Who Jumps in the previous picture was basically done, and John has taken he cuts his pieces up for the mold maker and makes a lot of decisions that a mold maker would usually make. Another thing to know about John Coleman is that he's done a lot of the bronze making process himself. He knows how to do most of it, and most of it he could do better than the people that do it. Especially if he had a little, give him like a month training, and he'd be able to do all this stuff, including the patinas and everything. But that front one there is one of his molds, and this is a mold storage room with a bunch of old Coleman molds and everything else. And so that's the first step of making a bronze sculpture, is making the rubber mold, which you then coat with a harder material like a
wax.
well, no, the
Oh,
harder
you're
around the
talking
mold,
about the mold. It's usually done with plaster and
or
some-
fiberglass.
and fiberglass
Yeah.
or burlap.
Yeah, so that holds the mold in place. Then let's go to the next. And then using hot wax like this, you make a wax copy of the piece. And that's the next shot. Oh, actually, I guess I'm out of order here. But you would make a wax copy, and then the wax gets coated with a ceramic shell. Let's see the next picture. Oh, I guess I skipped over some things, so go back to the pouring. Anyways, the wax gets coated with a ceramic shell over a period of days. The wax gets melted out, and we have a video of this online that you can look at later if you have more questions about this stuff, because I'm just going to blow right through it. But once the shell has coated the wax, you melt the wax out, and then you pour 2,000-degree bronze into the shell, and that forms the piece. This is a shot from Colorado, which is where all the Coleman pieces you see in this show were cast.
Yeah, just one thing of clarity too, so people understand, is that ERIK does everything except for the actual pouring. He does everything except for that part. So the pieces, the bronze pieces, are shipped to ERIK, and then it's a gigantic three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle that ERIK and his people puts together.
So this is what the He Who Jumps. This is actually the one that you see behind you, up here. We unloaded it out of a crate, and this is what it looked at. So you can can see his head.
Yeah, you can see the horse needed a nose.
Yeah, the horse needs a nose job real bad.
Yeah.
And then all the little fringe pieces and feathers and everything else, and that's how we get it. And then we start putting it together from there, which is quite a process. So we can go to the next. Okay, so what we would do is we would start getting all those pieces ready, and you would think that they just fit together real nice, but it's not always that way because the wax gets distorted during the process. And so we have to take pulleys and sledgehammers and who knows what else to make all the pieces fit. And this is where it's handy having John so close. He came over, geez, how many times you come over during this? Dozens of times.
Yeah, I'm on call, so to speak.
Yeah.
It doesn't take very long to get over. That's the beautiful thing about having ERIK in my backyard. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is John working with my guy Stan, putting the piece together. So you can see they're welding his arm on right there. So John's holding the arm right where he wants it, and Stan is welding it. Oh, this is kind of out of place, but hey,
Honeymoon.
what the heck? What do you think about that?
Yeah.
This is a little flashback to Montana. Go to the next one. Oh, somehow we got out of order a little bit. That's all right. Go back to the. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, what we were going to show you here is that some of you are familiar with Honeymoon at Crow Fair. That was a sculpture that I had done, and I had never put together a complete model set for that. But I thought at some point I wanted to do a painting of it. So when we were back in Montana, I got some models together and I had them recreate my sculpture. So I'm still not ready to do a painting of this, but this is like the beginning of, it's sort of like a feasibility study. Is this going to be a good idea for a painting?
So that's another example of the connection.
Yeah.
We'll just go back and forth. Now I don't know what pictures are coming up, so we'll just.
We're doing all right.
Yeah, we're
doing fine.
Okay, so next, this was actually when we finished that He Who Jumps. You may wonder, how did it get up here?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, how did it get up here?
Yeah, so we actually had to make the piece detachable. It has an armature underneath, and the piece it has a trap door, and we can unbolt it and remove the horse from the base, the tail. The lance is removable. We had to remove all that to fit it in the elevator to get it up here. And so this is when we were building a little carrying cart to get it up here. Let's see what's next. Oh, now there's John watching me do a patina. So that's another aspect. That's the honeymoon bronze. Okay, let's go next. Oh, this is doing the patina so when we had the He Who Jumps all finished. Of course, I had to do the patina.
This is the mid-size.
No, that's,
Oh, I see, it's just the way, I see.
it's just a weird,
Yeah, it's weird.
it's a weird angle. It's real close to me,
Okay, yeah,
and the
yeah.
piece is in the distance.
Yeah, I see, yeah.
But this is doing the patina. Next shot. So you can see basically the patina starts by heating the bronze up with a giant torch like that. And on a big one like this, I would use that big torch for the whole thing. And I can get into talking about that more with questions and everything after. But let's go to the next one. There you see me. See, that's the problem with me being kind of tall is
Yeah.
John doesn't like how I make the piece look smaller when I stand next to it.
Yeah, we're gonna, yeah, it's a kiss of death, you know?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I actually had to leave that. I couldn't put that in my normal patina area. I had to leave it out in the middle of the shop to do the patina. This is some of the chemicals that I use. So the process basically involves me dipping a brush in with the torch and using all the different chemicals. And I brought a lot of that stuff for you guys to see if you come up here. You can see like these are probably the exact squirt bottles. I'm dripping everywhere that I use to do that piece with. So I'll heat it and squirt bottle, and then maybe I'll dip the brush in.
Yeah, to add a little context to that, think of patina as instant oxidation. The key to good patina and why it isn't a paint job like on a car is that it's the natural oxidation colors that bronze is going to turn anyway. If you put a bronze next to the beach, you're going to get a green bronze. You put it in the Midwest, it's going to go kind of dark brown or black. So what a patineur will do is that, like in the old days, they used to dig a pit and put manure in it, and they'd bury the piece in the pit, and what it did is it just gave it the look that had been outside for a long time, so people weren't surprised. So today, though, with ERIK's heat, it opens up the pores in the bronze. The chemicals go in and connect to the bronze, and then through all kinds of different ins and outs, polishing and all these other things, he can manipulate the colors. But it's all still natural.
All right, well, I guess that's all the photos we have, but I think we can just talk more about the process.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get clear on that. That's one of the questions that's asked me the most is why do they call it patina and just not paint? And of course, the bronze is beautiful. It's going to age naturally. When it's done right, it looks more beautiful with time. I love old bronzes. And what ERIK will do is he sets the stage. So it's already got its first set of oxidation on it, and it's all natural. But it also has little, as you've seen some of my work, you'll see that there's color in it, and it varies. But it varies in a way that feels natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to talk more, instead of getting into all the details about the patina, which we've talked about lots of times, I thought I would talk a little bit more about our connection.
Oh, yeah.
Because, with this being called clay to bronze, and what this is really all about. So I told you how good John is at doing all these things, and I don't know how many of you know this, but he used to do all his own patinas. So when I first came to him starting my business 15 years ago, he was not only doing the sculpture, but he was doing his own patinas and packing and shipping, and he and Sue were working like crazy people to get all this done. Wasn't that kind of a wild time, Sue?
Yeah.
I actually used to marvel at their work ethic. Actually, when I first started my business, we all were working like 14 hours a day, every day. John would come in at 6 a.m. and everything else. But I guess I'll go back before that. I first met John in a drawing class that we were taking together.
At the community college in Prescott.
Yeah, we were taking a life drawing class, and people are always say, you were in the class together, he wasn't teaching. And no, this was actually just a few years after you started your art career, and he was just brushing up on his anatomy, practice for his sculpture and everything. And I was, I think I was 18 or 19 years old. And so, life drawing is nude models, so I guess that's why I was there. No, I'm just kidding. I was there for my art. But John and I used to actually stay after class and talk with the teacher for about an hour after every class. And oh shoot, I'm feeling very emotional lately, and that almost made me cry. You go ahead.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. The thing is there's a lot of gifts that people get during their lives, and one of them, of course, is to find your calling and have something that's passionate about. And then what happens is you start to meet other people who share those same traits. And of course, one of them was I married Sue. 52 years this month, by the way. 52 years. And then meeting Eric. Eric has a lot of passion, and and he wears it on his sleeve too, which is really nice. I have a tendency to be a little bit more inside. Eric is outside on that, and I found that somebody who could really connect to what I'm doing in a way and make it his own as well is something that I probably will never find again. And so we have this real strong bond. When we first came together on the patina thing, though, it was kind of an interesting scenario because I had realized that my work was successful, and I was putting out enough bronzes at the time to where getting them patinaed was becoming almost impossible because I was doing it myself. I started putting the word out to other patineurs in the country. I traveled around. We traveled all over the country trying to find someone to do this work. In my own backyard, Eric is working for one of the local foundries, and he was interested in checking it out. So he came by one day, and I put one of my pieces that I finished up, and then I gave him one that wasn't finished, and I said, "Here, copy it. Do this. See if you can do it for me." And the part that I find most interesting at this point, because it covers 2 points. The first thing is that his was actually better than mine, and I'd never seen that before. The other one is that it kind of struck a blow to my ego. And I thought to myself, I'm in the process of making a really important lesson that's going to be really good for me going forward, is I need to actually embrace the collaboration process with other artists, other people who can help me and be an advocate for the work and not just for my ego. In other words, what's good for the work? So it turned out that Eric had this special gift that fit exactly what I was looking for. And then as a side note, he had a partner that he was going to work with, and the partner felt some kind of loyalty to their old master that they were with and didn't want to leave. And I sucked it up and I said, "Eric, this is what we're going to do." And I showed him my back room that had all my stuff in it. And I said, "This is yours now. This is all yours. Just go for it. Take care of, start a business, take care of other clients. At least for the beginning, put me first."
Yeah, my partner bailed, and so I wasn't even going to start the business.
Yeah.
And basically John said, "Oh yeah, you're starting the business."
yeah, I'm so glad I did that. God, I'm so glad I did that.
He said you could rent space at my shop, and so I shared space with John and Sue for a few years.
Yeah, the thing about it is this is one of those sorts of art forms that no matter how good I got as a sculptor, a bad patina will still ruin my work. And people can't see past that. It's like putting a really stupid frame on a great painting. I mean, it just ruins it. Yeah. Or hang it in the wrong spot. Take it out of the frame and put it on the floor. I don't care how good it is. It won't look like anything. So the whole thing about having this, what as an artist I consider a level of excellence that doesn't follow through the whole process. And then also having somebody that can do that for me in a way that I feel confident that is better than what I would do, and not only better, but he will find things that are in the finished piece that maybe didn't come out quite right, that I might have overlooked. And so we're constantly running into that type of thing.
So we could talk about putting this piece together.
Yeah, and of course this is Crazy Horse before his final finish before the patina, and you can see all the weld marks, the grinding and stuff. But the other thing that we wanted to talk about is just some of these like little tendrils coming down that represent his hair and some of the ties and feathers. In the clay, they're sort of suggested. It isn't until I get into the bronze, and then and also it's kind of fun because ERIK and I are playing this together. Wouldn't this be better if it was a little bit more like this? Or we have a little piece that's added to the bottom, for instance, that it's just a little note is all it is, but it's sort of it helps like we're composing music. And I didn't even see it. And ERIK says, yeah, don't you think that adds a little? I go, gosh, you're right, it does. And then of course Sue's there, and Sue says, yeah, I think so too. And so then I know, okay, there's a point where all of a sudden every awkward moment in the thing starts to get dialed in, and that's the goosebump factor. You know, that's like in music, I've always loved that analogy, where you're listening to something that is really tight and ready to go, and it feels good, and then all of a sudden it changes, and instead of falling apart, it actually works. And then you get goosebumps. You go, wow, isn't that beautiful? It's the same thing in art. You want to create interesting problems that can be solved. Just keep everything too pat and too perfect is boring. And I always purposely, as I'm working, I always throw mistakes in and goofy things just to see the counterbalance in it. And along that same note, one of the things I recommend for people, it's easier done on a painting than a sculpture, but if you see a painting that you like, if you cover up a little spot in it, it should make it weaker. And what I mean by that is eloquence. Eloquence is something that is, even though something may look complicated, the whole body of everything and components in it should share some of the weight in the design aspect. And if it doesn't fall apart when you cover it, it means that piece you covered shouldn't be in the painting to begin with. Lincoln had this great letter that he wrote. A lot of people have heard of this. It's a great analogy. But in the letter, he started off by saying, I apologize in advance for the length of my letter. I didn't have time to make it brief. And of course, what's Lincoln known for? He's known for these beautiful letters. So I think most artists that are, Bill Anton and I talk about this all the time. We're not talking about putting more stuff in our work. We're talking about what we can leave out. In other words, how do you simplify a composition? Even though it may look complicated, and I always say that, and I wonder, people think I'm nuts because my work is kind of known for the stuff. Herb Menery calls this stuff drippings. He says, I like your drippings. and I go, yeah, that's a good word for it. But to me, I'm creating a potential design problem. And when it's solved, just like having a bird on the head, when the problem is solved and the design works, I think the piece is better for it. And it doesn't always work. That's the other part of it. And I didn't know if this worked right up until the last minute. Believe me. I mean, I wanted the challenge, and then finally, when ERIK and I are working it together, all of a sudden the thing starts to crystallize. Also, the size of the base, all those things start to come into play. And then you end up with this nice little package that everything fits.
And this shows, I mean, John is one of the few artists that will keep working all the way to the bronze to make his finished sculpture be what he wants it to be. He's not glued to any one idea. Like a lot of people, oh, the original clay, that's it. No, he's still thinking about it to the point where, like on this one now, the bronze that we've done is the model for the piece. We were modeling this off his clay, but then, a tweak here or there, still trying to make things better all the way to the bronze, and now the bronze is the model for the future pieces.
Yeah. That's the thing. And of course, part of this talk is just everybody is a little bit different. There's artists that do things differently than me and that are just as good, and I'm just doing it differently. But I am surprised that sometimes people will make a suggestion or ask a question like, I didn't know that after you dropped your clay off, that you actually are involved in the process of the casting. And it's surprising that some people think that you just drop it off at the front door and then they roll it out and you pick it up and it's all done. It's a work of art, and it doesn't work like that. In the beginning, I used to kid with my students, and I'd say, the bronze is there to ruin your work, and you need to think of it like that, because they can only do what they can do. They may be casting doorknobs or something, and then you give them a work of art that they don't really. They're going to do what they need to do. So you have to find a way to communicate, and that communication is hard for somebody who hasn't collaborated with other people before. So the collaboration process is really been a really important part for me. And as I brought up my painting, and a lot of people are kind of surprised by that too. I did start life as a painter. I was an artist when I was a teenager. When Sue and I got married, we were still teenagers, and we started our first business. She was 18 and I was 19, and the nature of the business was to make money. And I thought, okay, I'll get back to my art. And I was 42 years old, and I finally got back. But that's the short end of that story. But when I started back in, I got into sculpture, and auditions were a lot more conducive to the career than doing one painting at a time. I did a sculpture at a time, and I could make additions. But what happened is that I got back into the painting, and so many of the things I learned as a sculptor worked for painting as well. And so the collaboration thing with ERIK has come into play on the painting. When he comes over to the studio quite a bit, he also kind of enjoys documenting what I'm doing, and through that process, he will make suggestions about even the size of a painting, like, God, this ought to be bigger, John, or maybe this is too small, or I might really love something, and he might say, God, I don't know about that. That's it's got some issues here, and then of course Sue will kind of collaborate on that same deal, and it does. It makes you feel like you're not in a bubble that way. It's a scary thing. This show is terrifying, I'll tell you, because most artists do 2 or 3 works of art. They go to a show, and if they have one bummer, that's fine. They had 2 good ones. But if you do 20 new pieces that nobody's ever seen before, you put them all on the floor at once. It's really helpful, to have people you trust who, if they don't like it, they'll tell you it's not right. And
that's my specialty.
That's your specialty. But again, you can tell we're very, very close, and and that's a very special thing that we have, and especially from the artist point of view.
Should we take some more questions?
Every time you create, like your paintings and your sculptures, up to your finished product, you go off of what you think or how you feel about it.
Yeah, that's a good feeling is always the most important. Think is the craftsman part. The feel is the poetry part. I've seen some really pieces of art that weren't executed very well that felt really, really good. And I'm always more impressed with the poetry in something. And I think that might be what you're talking about, because it's just, if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't feel good, but it could be that it's got some sour notes hidden in it somewhere, or it's weighted down somewhere, that it could be more eloquent. The word eloquence has always fascinated me. It's a funny word, it's like you can tell a story, and you can have a 300-page book to tell the story, or you can say it in 1 page. I always use the example of Shakespeare in his Romeo and Juliet has this line where Romeo looks up and Juliet walks out on the terrace, and the word is just simply, she touches her face, and then the next phrase is to be a glove. And the reason why he was able to get away with those few words is because people already know the experience. They already understand the storyline. You got 2 kids, very young kids, who want to be together, but the families are feuding and they're not allowed to be together. And what he's saying, I would give up my life this moment to be with her. And it's done so eloquently because people already know the backstory. So backstory is always the feeling. And if you can't create a work of art that doesn't immediately emotionally make an impact on some level, then there's no point in making the art. One of the worst compliments an artist can get, one of them, and I know everybody says this, and I'm perfectly fine with it, is, gee, that looks like a photograph. They don't know what else to say. That means they probably like it and all that, but really what it means is that they're looking at the rendering or the mechanics before they're looking at the feeling. And of course, then my rationalization is I love Ansel Adams, and everything he did was a photograph. So that's not really not a compliment necessarily, but to that point, structural design and good anatomy is only part of the vocabulary. It's Rachmaninoff learning how to play the piano, but it's not his skills at the piano that makes it beautiful. It's it's how he executes it, and it's the feeling that comes across.
Another question? Oh, Sherry.
John, you're working in 2 dimensions, I mean the 3rd dimension and then painting. When you set up your models for either one, do you work from model or do you use the photography?
Both.
Like
both.
when do you pose the model in clay and then?
Yeah, in clay, not so much.
No.
In 2 dimension, what Sherry is talking about is the complication that happens in a painting is that you have shadow, and you have how the shadows move around the form, and it's extremely complicated. In a sculpture, you're dealing in real life, so you're creating a 3 dimension that you are literally painting with light, how the light hits it. So, but they are completely different. The hard part about the sculpture is that it has to be beautiful for 360 degrees. A painting only needs to be good for 1. But you have to create the illusion of depth in a painting. And I use the idea of setting up a model mostly for getting ideas. But yet the main thing that I'm interested in is the drama. And I have a love for that old Rembrandt kind of look. Old movies like Fritz Lang, Metropolis, the old German movies, if you're old movie buff, they use so much with light and dark and the mystery that it creates. So my style has sort of evolved from those sort of mysterious backdrops. And so I collect a lot of images and stuff. That's the other part that's kind of interesting about being alive today as an artist. Bill and I argue about this sometimes because he says, God, no one's ever going to be as good as those characters that lived 100 years ago. And I'm thinking to myself, it may be true, but they didn't have iPhones, and they don't always know what the guy in China is doing right now or the guy in Russia. I do. I can see their work, and I get inspired by some kid in Russia that just did something that blows my mind. And I'm thinking to myself, what some of these guys from the Renaissance or from the great impressionist Sargent. Sargent was the best of the best, but he didn't have an iPhone. And if he's better than anybody else, it makes it even more amazing. But it shouldn't be that way. I keep thinking that the best art is yet to come, because we can share our skills in a way, and we can understand, I think, more about how to get to the point.
I think the best is yet to come.
Yeah.
Back there?
Yeah. I'm curious how you decide on an edition size, and
Yeah.
So you can make it accessible to enough people without saturating the market.
Yeah, boy, that's the key to everything, isn't it?
You just answered your question. Put a number that makes it accessible but doesn't saturate the market.
Yeah, the thing is, this is the thing. It's like that I have a painting. I was a painter before, and I had my career. And when I wanted to get back into art, I realized that sculpture was something I was going to do, and I started doing that. But my heart sunk when I walk into a kind of a high-end gift shop, and I saw some little tchotchkes, or whatever you want to call them, hanging around. They were very well rendered. And I thought to myself, wow, I couldn't do any better in the rendering department, but yet, why come this thing is only $20 and here I'm going to try to sell something for $2,500? How does that work? You have to understand the psychology of what original art is, and what the process of creating something that's collectible. How does it work? There's a critical mass thing that happens, to really explain what you were talking about. The edition has to be big enough to where people know about it. In other words, big enough to where people are going to be able to see it. And the other thing is that it has to be, if it's too small, it's going to be too expensive. Nobody could afford it or want to afford it, because it would be one of a kind.
And that's one thing I should say in case you all don't already know it, but bronzes are super expensive to make, as you can probably tell from all the work that has to go into it.
Yeah, if this was a one-of-a-kind piece, I mean, what would it be worth? A couple, $200,000 maybe. No one's going to pay that for it, and they don't need to, because it's an edition of 20. So I can charge more like 10% of that $200,000, let's say. But it's kind of like a converging line. When I started my career, Most of my pieces were 35. That was my edition I landed on. I thought 50 was too high. At some point, if you go 75 or 100, it starts to feel a little bit like a gift shop. Why even make it? Just make it an open edition? And there's some really good sculptors out there that don't even number their work. They make them like they used to back in the old days. They make them as they need them. But I hit a certain age. I can't remember exactly how old I was. I might have been maybe when I turned 60. I dropped my editions down to 20. I still use 35 on my little pieces, but I found that part of the practical reason for that is that I didn't want to compete with my own pieces on the secondary market. And when you have a high edition, when you see estates and stuff like that come up and your pieces go on sale, the bigger the edition, the more of them are out there, the less they're going to go for.
And you're also protecting all your collectors
And I protect your,
that have bought all your pieces by having a low.
Yeah, so I've been fortunate that so far my auction prices have held on the secondary market. And part of that is because my editions are relatively low. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Another one? Oh.
Do you write poetry?
Only in my head. But I love poetry. I love it. I am dyslexic, and I have that's become a kind of a gift to me. It's helped my art career. But I'm literally at some level of illiterate when it comes to certain things. I have a lot of trouble reading, and I almost don't write anything. And I say almost, I mean, given that where I have to, I mean, I can go back and forth. And I got my little wheelchair for my mind in my pocket, my iPhone. And I can do my speech-to-text stuff. But I never graduated from high school. My story is such that I was even tested in the 7th grade to see if I needed to be in the special needs. Because in those days they didn't know about stuff like that. And I didn't either. All I knew is that it was embarrassing. And so I didn't excel in that. So the poetry thing came to me more of like music. I heard Rhapsody in Blue when I was like 10 years old. And it haunted me because I didn't know what I heard. It was so beautiful. And it was years later that I found out what it was that I heard. And so I started to appreciate how the human brain takes in these sorts of rhythms and applies them to our own stories. One of the things I like to explain to my students is that you're not taught to smile. And I ask everybody, tell me where I'm wrong. That smile is the first level of communication that anybody has, and nobody teaches you how to do it. It's inherently ingrained in you. So what is an artist? An artist isn't somebody that replicates something. An artist is somebody that makes poetry. And why is poetry not just words? Poetry has rhythms in it that speaks to your own experience. And it'll remind you of something happening in your own life. And it brings you back to that wonderful feeling. So if I do a painting or a sculpture, it's not for me, it's for the viewer when they encounter it. And it'll bring up something that they thought of, whether it's a very masculine piece or a very feminine piece. And so to me, that's the key. That's poetry. And yeah, I just absolutely love poetry, but it is very complicated. And I lean to that a lot.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more time. One more question if somebody's got it.
Oh. It's about the patina. Is there a different patina for an outdoor installation, or is all patina able to keep that outside? You could choose to do a different one for outside, being that if something's outside, it's probably going to change more. And so what I would call really fancy patinas, we might not do as much outside, but when it comes to John's work, they're all the same. And, I'll use a special lacquer for outdoor pieces and wax it good, and then recommend that people wax it once a year or so. But other than that, John's whole idea on the look of his patinas in the first place was that if the bronze was buried, say, and hundreds of years went by, and kind of a miracle happened, could it be possible that it would age to look sort of how it does? Real natural colors and everything, and maybe one time you get lucky and the skin has just that right patina and everything. So we try to keep it real natural and so his are all the same.
Yeah, real quick, the history of my patina started with when I started. There was an artist called Dave McGarry, and Dave didn't always get a lot of respect for the sculpture part, which I thought in a way was a shame. But his main thing that he was good at is the history part, and his work was very accurate. The part that some people loved but they also didn't love is that he used paint on his work, and so he painted. They were polychrome, in other words, and that's not unusual. Back in the day, even the Greeks painted their sculptures, and so they were very colorful. And so my first few pieces, I always credited Dave as being the one that I came off of. I came off of Dave's idea of color. The problem is that as I got more into the art part, I realized that using color to inform people about the sculpture part seemed sort of like a sin in a way. It was like it reduced the eloquence of the piece, I'll say. It added another dimension that I thought, for me, wasn't appropriate. And so my patina evolved out of that. So no paint, but yet I still, a lot of times if there's lots of white, like feathers and stuff, I will suggest that color. The color of the skin, I'll suggest it. But I don't want, when you walk up to it, I don't want you to automatically see it. ERIK will polish off certain areas, like if there's like shells or other little jewelry kind of things that can be highlighted. Those become nice little highlights, and I just don't want you thinking about that when you walk up to it. But I want it to be enhanced, and so far, and that's why it took me so long to find someone to do all this, because it's actually, you ask anybody, what's the hardest thing in the world to do, and that's simple. Simple is very hard.
Yeah, actually, John's patinas are still, I guess they're easy for me because I have the connection to what he wants, but they're still some of the hardest ones to do where I can't, it's not easy for me to find someone to help me do his work. So that's why I've done every one of his patinas.
Yeah, and I'll just say in closing, I've had people ask me, what's your advice? I'm getting ready to start. What's your advice? And as you gathered, there's a hell of a lot of luck involved in this. And the luckiest thing I did was to not let ERIK get away from me. And then, of course, the first lucky thing I did is not let my wife get away from me. So you can't recreate that. I'm a very lucky guy.
This gentleman has been trying to ask a question, right? Oh, one real quick.
What year did the two of you come together?
It's been, what, 15 years ago?
Yeah,
but we've known each other for...
I met John in probably 94, and then I started my business in 2005. So, but 94 was when we used to talk after class and talk about art and everything like that, and then it wasn't until 10 years later that I came to him and started my business.
The reason I asked is the first piece of John's that I bought was, I'm a former member of the Men's Arts Council.
Oh, yeah.
My name is George Bingham.
Oh, yeah, George. Yeah.
The first piece I purchased was in 2004. So.
Oh, which piece?
Black Moccasin.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what's funny? He probably did your patina, but I did do a few of those.
That's why I was asking.
Yeah. So we'll see which one was the better one.
Yeah. And it's number 7.
Yeah, okay.
Mine were better, so if you want me to redo it.
I probably couldn't afford it now.
If it was number 7, I did it. Yeah, but that was right when ERIK came to me, during that period. Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, that gives me some history because I have bought several pieces since then.
Yeah,
so,
cool.
Okay. ERIK, John, thank you very, very much. I'd like to make a couple of comments. We started Legacy Gallery about 32 years ago, and so we've seen a lot of artists in that time period. And so I've made observations of what is it that makes an artist stand out, set themselves apart. Well, first of all, they've got to have their own voice. In other words, what I mean by that is when you look at a painting from across the room, you know it's Howard Turpning. Well, John has his own voice. You look at any one of these works of art, you don't have to go look at the signature. He's got a signature without a signature. It's his voice, his look. And that's one of the things that I've observed also is that they're always a student. They don't quit learning. There's never a sense that I've arrived. And if you should have been able to gather that from John, he's continually studying. He's taking, I hear he's flying off to take classes from some other artist, and he's always a student. The other thing that I've observed is they're willing to collaborate. What I mean by that is they're willing to have outside input in their work before it hits the market. Some artists I know I can't say that to, but other artists, if I see something, I know they want me to say, you know, there's something that is grabbing my eye here that's dominating the painting that you really might want to consider looking at, you know, reevaluating. The old saying, you can't see the forest from the trees. Boy, artists struggle with this. They're so involved in the work that they can't get a fresh perspective at times. One of the great tricks that I hear John do is he'll leave, go on a trip or something, and come back and look at several pieces that he was close to finishing because he sees it with a fresh set of eyes. But the collaboration part I referred to, obviously ERIK has been a big part, and Sue. I know at times I've talked to John and he's a little frustrated. He thought the painting was done and Sue wouldn't let it out of the studio. So, I mean, it is an important part. And John, thank you for all the years. I mean, we're talking about dates and stuff.
Yeah.
You became CA member in 2001.
2001, that's
and
right.
I think you were with us a couple of years prior to that.
That's right.
So it'd
that's
be
right.
a long time.
Yeah, we've been together a long time. My goodness.
A long
God,
time.
I know.
So,
we're growing old together.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Tonight, let me talk to you about the show tonight. It opens at 5. We'll conclude at 7. The draw is at 6:30. So most of the paintings are on draw. So if you would like the opportunity to purchase, we have an intent to purchase slip. You can work through our salespeople. There's only one painting that is on silent auction, and there's a fixed price. It's the piece that John talked quite a bit about tonight, and that's the 1876 Gaul, Sitting Bull, and Crazy Horse. And that piece is a minimum bid of $173,000, and we will open those envelopes at tonight and see what the highest bid is. So it's a minimum bid of $173,000. If you want to bid more, you have the opportunity to do so. The sculpture, just so we're all clear on it, what we did with an edition that was 20, we said we're going to do first come, first serve for the first 15, and the last 5 will be put on draw if we sell those first 15. Well, Crazy Horse is at that point, so the last 5 of Crazy Horse will be put on draw, and I think there's still the other small bronzes are first come, first serve. The big one, He Who Jumps Over Everyone, there's 5 of those, and they're first come, first serve until we get to 1. So thank you for being here. I hope it was informative. I learned a lot. I always do, John. Thank you very much.
And if anybody wants to come look at this stuff or ask a few more questions, I'll hang around.
Great. See you tonight.
I can.